called Seeing Beyond Perspective. I think as we approach the concept of what, if anything, is beyond perspective, we'll start to find that there's a lot of depth here, and I look forward to sharing this with you. In order to do that, in order to really see if there is anything beyond perspective, which we're going to get into, but I'm going to have to take you on a little journey, you might say. I'm going to do a guided meditation or a little practice at the end of this video to try to have you or help you experience exactly what I'm talking about. So stick around for that. I think it's going to be really cool. In order to talk about what might lie beyond perspective, we have to discuss what is perspective a little bit. I actually just finished, or I tried to. I've been having a little bit of technical issues with my website today, but I just was supposed to release my final installation on a 3-part series about perspective on my blog. And this has been quite a journey just doing that, because I started with the basics, which I want to do today with you, because if we're going to really go deep here into this conversation, we kind of got to make sure that we're sharing language and that we're looking at it from a very wide angle, you might say. So I want to start with you today on the basics of what is perspective and how does it come into creation. I think we're also going to see that a lot of my live streams that I've done already are going to all start to fit together here, maybe more than ever. And there's always this like interlocking or overlaying of these things, because the truth is the truth and reality is reality. What's real is real. So they always find their way in every conversation, but I think we're going to really see it here today, which also gets me kind of excited. So one of the ways that that's true is the fact that I just did a stream, I think it was a couple streams ago, that where I talked about your story. And I said deciphering fact from fiction. And I went into what your story is and all that kind of stuff. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because your story or stories and perspective are very similar, pretty much synonyms for each other. I think I probably mentioned that in that conversation. But your story is sort of like it's all of that, right? It's like I talked about, like it's where you grew up, it's how you grew up, it's your physical body even, right? Like are you heavy, are you tall, are you short? Like all these things play a part in the story that you carry around about yourself and the world, right? Of course, this is perspective too, right? We can see that. It's probably not too hard to see, I hope. And this is a very specific way of talking about perspective, right? Because it's your perspective, it's your story. But in order to get a wider view, as I'm talking about, we're going to have to approach this almost more philosophically. So I'm going to start talking to you about the basics to perspective. How is perspective created? Not just your life, right? But we're going to strip it down to a very elemental level. And we do that by talking about subject and object. In order to have a perspective, you need to have a subject and an object. Now, in my blog, which I'm just going to run with that, because if you read it, by the way, there is a link in the description, so if you want to check out those blogs. In order to talk about it, I'm going to use the same example that I used in the blog, which is that, first of all, you are always the subject. Always. Doesn't matter what's going on, where you are in your life, you are the subject. Whatever you're looking at or experiencing is the object. In the blog, I used the example of a tree. So we'll run with that today. You are the subject, and the tree, if you're standing there looking at a tree, is the object. And the moment that happens, the moment that there's subject and object, there's a perspective. There's a viewpoint, a vantage point, right? There's the way that you're looking at it. There's your whole story that you have about trees and about, understanding what that tree means. In the blog, I talk about, like, is it a healthy tree, right? And in order for you to know that, or your answer to that, I should say, is going to depend a lot about your perspective, your story, right? This is the filter, as I've often talked about it too, that you put through life. Like, life is coming in through the filter of your story and your perspective. But this is created from this subject-object relationship. It's a very simple way of looking at it, and it's very true. So what could there be outside of subject and object, outside of perspective? How would we begin to even consider. Because this is our common day experience of life, right? Subject, object. It doesn't matter what it is, right? Whether you're looking at your wife or a husband, or you're looking at the chair or your food to eat, all these things, they are objects to you. And that's because you have some sort of relationship going on that says, I'm in here, and everything else is out there. Now, what's in here, right? Well, in here usually is our body. That's what we think of, right? We're thinking about our experience in here. Nobody else seems to be in there, right? We're in there all by ourselves. But everything else we experience as objects. In order to begin to consider what might lie outside of perspective, beyond perspective, we have to start to realize that this relationship that we're very used to, this way of observing the world and taking in the world, may be a little different than we realize. Now, I want to talk to you about it in the same terms. So in other words, let's say you're looking at a tree, okay? In order for you to see beyond perspective, you're going to have to lose the object. How are you going to lose the object? Now, I don't mean the tree disappears, because that wouldn't be much of a conversation then, right? Poof, oh, that's the... No. How do we see beyond perspective? If we lose the object, then there's no perspective. There's only perception. There's only subject. Now, this might sound outlandish, and this is part of what I want to walk with you today through at the end of this live stream, where we actually do a little practice in hopes that you can experience this for yourself, because it is a very real thing, actually. In order to do that, though, I'm going to start talking to you about how that perception or that perspective is actually what it is, but we perceive it too, that this is out there and that I'm in here, is misguided a bit. And I'm going to start doing that by using our intellect. We're going to just kind of approach it by talking about it intellectually. Now, the thing I have to point out, though, is that is a limited perspective in itself. In the live stream about your story, I mentioned right away that you think in stories. You think in perspective. This is how the mind works. The mind likes to break things up. It likes to differentiate things, right? It likes to say up and down and back and forth and good and bad and right and wrong. And this is that dualistic sort of binary way of looking at the world. This is kind of how the mind works. And this is how it says, I'm in here and you're out there. So if we're going to see beyond perspective, we're actually going to have to loosen the grip of that intellectual thing there. But before we do that, I'm going to use it to see if we can't start pointing you in the right direction, okay? So you're standing there looking at a tree. It seems as if that tree is out there and you're in here. But if we think about it, even intellectually, we know that this is not totally true, meaning that we're separate things. The first way we can acknowledge that is to say that we share a home, right? If I'm looking at a tree here on my property, it's on my property, which is my home, in the state of New York, on the planet Earth, right? This is our home. We share this experience together. Another level that's very familiar with us is the fact that we have an exchange. We have a very intimate exchange with trees, which is one of the reasons why I picked it. It's easier to see it because we have this exchange that I inhale the oxygen that comes from the tree. And it inhales the carbon dioxide that I exhale. It's a very intimate connection that we share like that. Now, if we just leave that reality in our heads, it could kind of be like, oh, okay, well, big deal. I knew that. What's the big deal there? I'm not seeing anything different. I'm not seeing beyond perspective here. But that will happen only if you stay in your head. Another way that I would like to share the same exact information is a way to try to help it approach your heart a little bit. And we're going to get into this later as we start to talk about this practice. Now, I'm not saying abandon the head, right? I'm still going to talk to you through the intellect here. but hopefully I can stimulate a different response in you. That exchange that you have and that I have with trees is on the order of the fact that, let's talk about your body. Your heart pumps blood through your body, right? Your lungs breathes in the air and it brings oxygen to the blood. And the heart pumps the blood through the body and keeps everything working really cool, right? The order that we have with a tree, the relationship is what I meant to say, that we have with a tree is in a similar manner. It's that intimate. Where would you be without trees? We start to approach the intimacy. This isn't even, we're not even getting really deep yet, but this is how connected you are, like a heart and lungs. We share a home. We share an intimate exchange. Here's the point. We don't go around our life thinking that way. Instead, we think, I'm in here, and that tree's out there. And we do that with everything. I'm in here, and my wife's out there. I'm in here, and everybody and everything else is out there. But the truth is, on a very similar plane to what I just explained to you. We are connected in ways that are far deeper than even just this physical thing. But I hesitate to go there because it could be very distracting. I think at this level, though, we can accept that there's a deep connection. That this concept of the fact that I'm in here and you're out there and that's the end of the story is not actually very true. Matter of fact, in the blog, I go as far as to say it's a fiction. It's not true at all. When we start to see it at this level, if we're looking at that tree like that, the concept, because that's really all it is, of object starts to fall away a little bit. It starts to loosen that grip. And once that loosens, and to the degree to which we can loosen the grip on that, this concept, this perspective that I'm in here and you're out there and that's the end of the story, we'll see that perspective starts to fall away. As I said, I'm hoping to share this experience with you in a few minutes. But this is a very real thing. Matter of fact, like I said, this is more real than the I'm in here, you're out there, end of story fiction that we carry around as our day-to-day life. The moment we start to realize it at this, if you think about it too, whatever ails you, you might say, whatever ails humanity comes from this concept that I'm in here and you're out there and everything else is out there. When you are feeling depressed or anxious, right? It's because you are feeling completely constrained and alone in here. But if you were to realize that this in here is actually something that is created in your mind, it's more of a perspective it's more of a way of looking at things than it is the way things are. If you were to loosen that, you would immediately start to feel a shift in that experience. This is why if you're depressed and you have a very intimate conversation with somebody where you share, you'll feel that depression, lessen. It doesn't necessarily go away. We know that that can be quite a journey, but you'll feel it lessen. This is part of what's beautiful about therapy or life coaching or stuff like that, because sharing your experiences with another person helps break this facade down a bit. We feel that connection, and it brings all kinds of benefits from it. Every problem, but every issue we have as human beings stems from this sense of separation. And the sense of separation, as I said, is actually a fiction. It doesn't matter on which level you go, which level you approach it. It's not real. It's actually a creation of our minds. So when we see object dropped away, that now hopefully maybe that means a little bit more. Now that doesn't mean the tree disappears, right? But all of a sudden, I'm not feeling so separate. Perspective starts to loosen. It starts to, what actually happens at first is it expands. If you expand your perspective enough, though, it kind of drops away. So, in order to have this experience that I'm trying to share with you, which is actually quite commonly called like a unitive experience, right? Where you're feeling a sense of connection, a sense of non-separation, of unity, right? In order to have this, it can't just live in the head. The head, as I said, is the creation of this sense of separateness, actually, because in every other way it doesn't exist. I remove the air from the room, you're no more, right? I remove the sun, you're no more. If we remove the trees, all these things, you're connected in a very visceral way. Yet, we go around thinking that I'm in here and you're out there. This whole thing gets summarized in the other talk I just did last week about, though I am not you, though I am not the tree, I am not separate from the tree. This acknowledges both things, right? Because, of course, in a certain strange way, I am in here and it's out there. That's the though I am not the tree, right? We're acknowledging the fact that there's something that seems different here. But I'm not separate from the tree. Though I am not the lungs, I am not separate from, I'm a heart. You're the lungs. Can you see that? Like, there's that sort of intimate connection going on. So to take us to this practice that I'd like to share, and what we're going to do is we're going to pick an object. I highly recommend a tree if you actually have a view of one out a window, or if you're sitting outside and you can look at a tree, that would be great. A plant is great. Flowers are wonderful. It doesn't have to be anything like that, though. It can literally be anything. It could be a chair. But, it tends to, if it's a living thing, if it's something that you feel kind of a connection to it already, it makes this bridging this chasm a little bit easier. Because this concept of the fact that we're separate is a very long-held belief. So it can be challenging to try to go across that chasm that we've created that makes us feel like we're in here and everything's out there. But what we're going to do is we're going to pick an object and we're going to take a few minutes to look at it and sense the fact, not just with our minds, but sense the fact that yes, indeed, there's something more than I'm in here and you're out there. In order to do that, though, I have to talk about a few things. Now, a lot of them we've already talked about, but I want to talk about them very specifically in hopes that it orients you, it faces you in the right direction so that we can have this experience together. The first thing that I want to say is that you can't be trying to make something happen, right? Because if you try to make this experience happen, you're going to interfere with it. It's actually a very natural thing. It's reality, as I like to say, really. We're not doing anything. As I say in the blog that I wanted to release today, this is like peeling the curtains back. You're not creating the sunlight. You're only peeling the curtains back that are blocking the light that's already there, right? This is already real. We just got to kind of open up ourselves in a way that we can sense it, because you can in a very, very real way. So in order to do that, though, you can't be trying to make that happen. That'll just interfere with it. Funny enough, that's because it'll be like the small you, the ego you, trying to take control of it. We like to have cool experiences, and believe me, this is a cool experience. But if you're trying to have it, it's going to get in the way of actually doing it because you're trying to control and possess it. And this thing can't be controlled or possessed. It's a very natural thing. So, by the way, mentioning this can actually add a whole nother layer. You'd be like, oh, okay, I got to not try. Don't worry about it. But I have to mention it because it's important to see the fact that you could try to possess this. And if you do that, it's going to interfere with it. So we're just going to approach this very naturally, very easily. The second thing is that, which I did talk about quite a bit already, if we're trying to do this only with our head, we're going to find we're not going to be able to do it. There's going to be a limit there, because thinking has its limits. Now, we're not trying to get rid of thinking. It has its place, it has its purpose, even here, even right now. But we can't only live in our heads. if we want to see beyond perspective, I suggest that we lower our awareness a little bit and pull it into our heart. Now, the heart's a fantastic place to reside. Matter of fact, the heart is the center of all unity, of all connection. That sensing of connection, that's why we esteem it so much, right? And we love the symbol and all that stuff. It always stands for love. Love is certainly connection, right? The heart is the region that this happens very naturally. The mind has a hard time with, though I am not the tree, I'm not separate from the tree. The heart understands it perfectly. It doesn't even struggle with that, actually. It already knows it. So we're gonna want to try to pull our awareness down from our head. We live in our heads primarily, by the way. This is a place we're used to. I actually personally think that that's because most of our sensing organs are all up here, right? Our eyes, our ears, our taste, our smell, it's all up here. So it kind of makes us feel like we reside up here. This is where we are. But it's not the only place we are. And it's actually far from it, right? If we pull it down into our heart, you'll find it much easier to have this experience that I want to share with you. So we're going to do that before we start this meditation, okay? The third thing that I want to share with you is breath, breathing. Breathing is a wonderful and practical way to start to pull yourself inward, you could say. Ground yourself. That's the other thing about the heart. It's the center. It's the center of the body. It's definitely, especially the center of what they call the subtle body. And we're not going to get into that in this talk, but maybe soon we will. If you know anything about the chakra system, the center, or the heart is at the center, right? There's 7, and that's right at the center. It's a great place to pull from the lower faculties and the upper faculties and find that unity. It's part of why we're going to focus there a little bit. Breath is a wonderful way to pull yourself in there. Breath is talk about natural, right? I mean, you breathe, I'm pretty sure they say about 23,000 times a day on average, right? So you're very familiar with breathing. And breathing is very united to the natural flow of life. I love it. This is part of why I love religions, like them talking about God breathing life into man. It's a way of pointing to the power that exists in your breath, right? Bringing some awareness. I think that's a subtle way in that story of saying, hey, pay attention there. There's something there for you, right? So we're going to access this through some breathing today. And I'm going to walk you through a way to, just do a few deep breaths in hope that we can pull our awareness from our head down to our heart and then engage with this, whatever your object that you chose, and have this experience of non-separation. Okay? So breathing, I want to finish a few details that I didn't talk about because they're so beautiful and useful. When we breathe in first, right? Or we breathe in, we open, and we allow. That's what's happening, actually. We're allowing air to rush in. You're actually just opening your chest cavity, and air comes rushing in, right? When you breathe out, you're letting go. Actually, I have an online course that's really about just that. It's teaching you a process of breathing, and it really focuses on those two movements, allowing and letting go. Your body's doing this 23,000 times a day. It's a natural flow, in and out. Anybody who saw the live stream I did about the prodigal son, he went out, he started in, home, right? And then he went out, and then he came back in. Out and in. It's a natural rhythm to life. So we can access this through our breathing, and we're going to do that, okay? When we do this as the exercise, which we're about to do, so I encourage you to, as I'm talking like this, hopefully you can listen and maybe consider what it is that you're going to spend time gazing at, looking at. When we breathe in, I want to take a couple, probably 3-4 deep breaths. And when we do that, I want you to focus taking a full breath and not forcing, but gently inviting your breath to go all the way down into your abdomen, almost like to take that full deep breath. And when you exhale, I want you to try to release all your air. You're going to release all of your tension, all of your preconceived ideas of what we're going to be doing here, all of your perspective, right? We're just going to let it all go with that out breath. So in, nice full deep breath. We're going to be allowing, trying to go in deep and then out, letting go. And as we let go too, we're going to settle, we're going to pull our awareness down into our heart. So what do you think? You ready? I'm going to give you a couple more seconds here to just talk here for a second to hopefully you've picked your object. Like I said, if it's a tree or a flower or a plant or a pet, as long as that pet's laying still, it makes it a little easier for you, right? It can be your hand even, strangely enough. Pick an object. And we're going to start with a few deep breaths, okay? Here we go. So a nice deep breath in. All the way down into your abdomen, you're allowing everything to be just as it is right now. And then exhale. Everything out. Settling down into your heart. In, deep breath. Out. Exhale. Let go. In. Allow. Open. Let go and settle into your heart. One more time. In. Out. Now look at your chosen object. Now you're just going to breathe natural. And you're going to look and be still. See as you look, see if you can find within yourself a place that's very quiet, a place that's very still. And see if you can't sense that stillness in the object you're gazing at. Look deeply. Look with more than your eyes. Look with your whole body. See if you can sense the fact that though you are not this object, you are not separate from this object either. You might have a sense that all of a sudden there's only awareness. It's not so much you're in here and it's out there. It's just perception. There's just perceiving. There's just allowing and letting go. There's more here than you could ever imagine. In the stillness that exists within this moment, there is a stillness that exists in all moments. There is access to this experience always. Though you are not this object, you are not separate from this object either. There is a presence here that holds it all, and you are it. From this place, we can heal all wounds. From this place, we find our home. From this space that we're allowing right now, with no story, no perspective, just seeing, just being, we can feel the wholeness. From this place, everything is sacred. And when we have a sense of the sacred, we treat everything with reverence. This is what the world needs. I'm not the only one that needs it. You're not the only one that needs it. The whole world is desperate for this sense of home. To realize that though I am not you, I am not separate from you. To live from this space is to change the orientation of your life. It's to drop object. It's to loosen your tight grip on your story, on your perspective. We don't lose it entirely, because though I'm not you, I'm still me. But I'm not just only this little me. There's something there that's so much more. And when I take the time to look that way, at a tree, at a chair, at a stone, at my own hand, how mysterious to look at my own hand and realize that I'm more than that. Life takes on a new direction. I encourage you to go about your life taking the time to do this. Whether you take specific, special time like meditation time to connect with something at this level, or you're just standing in the grocery line in your busy life and then all of a sudden, this is part of the course too, right? Remember, this sense of unity lives right here, right now, in this busyness, in this bustle, in this place that I might actually experience anxiety sometimes. Wait, what else is here? There's more. I encourage you to engage in yourself. This is your inner world that actually, when you go this deep into your inner world, it becomes the whole world. It becomes the universe, so to speak, right? This is how deep your inner world is. There's no end to it. I keep exploring it and going, and it just gets deeper and deeper and more joyous. I don't know if you can feel this. I'm praying that you've tasted a little bit of this that I'm trying to share with you right now. It is freedom. It is joy, it is peace. And it's always there. Now, I don't always experience it either, right? It's not like this is my all day, everyday life. But to know that it exists and to be able to take myself there, to remind myself, to remember, there's more to life than whatever I'm caught up in. It's very powerful. This, because we never go here, or very few of us spend time in this place that's actually our home, that's actually reality, This is why we often feel so lost. This is why we often feel depleted, like I can't keep this up, I'm exhausted, all these sorts of things, because we don't spend enough time in the source, you could say, right? In our home, in reality. I was promised myself I was going to remind people to ask questions, to think about questions if you have them. I didn't do that early enough. I was talking to somebody who watches the live stream, a very good friend of mine, and he's like, maybe if you mentioned it in the beginning or in the middle, then people could think about it, because it's kind of like we're just listening, and then all of a sudden you're like, hey, you got any questions? I really encourage you, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them right now. I'm going to hang tight for a few minutes, ramble on for a few more seconds. If you have a question and you don't get the time to ask it right now, in the description, I'm almost positive I have my email. I'll make sure I put it in there after, if it isn't. Email me. Ask me the question. I would love to do my best to help you understand this. This thing that I'm trying to share with you today is beyond, is a great word for it. It's beyond anything that I ever imagined there was prior to actually tasting it. And it's beyond the limits of all these things that we set on ourselves. So the power that resides here is what I'm trying to share, is limitless. It's amazing. The shifts that you can experience in your life, from starting to loosen the grip, starting to let the concept of subject-object drop away a little bit. Not holding that so tight. Not holding on to our story so tight. Not holding on to our personal perspective so tight. It shifts your whole experience of the world. No questions, I'm assuming. As always, I thank you for your time. It's precious.